Hi folks, this is Karim Raouf from IT Visualizer channel. They will continue our lab matrix labs, the video number 22. We have been discussing in the previous video the following. I've been working on explaining and exploring the DCDIAG tool, which is a very good tool for troubleshooting and verifying problems concerning the Active Directory and the domain controllers. We all know that the Active Directory is a complex system that contains a lot of components. The DCDIAG tool is an important tool to uh, troubleshoot the various components of the Active Directory and the various components of our domain controllers. For example, the event viewers, the DCDIAG tool will check the event viewer for the domain controllers to check for any errors, okay, concerning the system of the domain controller or certain services. The DCDIAG tool will test the replication of the Active Directory database. All of this is done using the DCDIAG tool, which provide a detailed reports or detailed reports concerning the status and the health of the Active Directory and the domain controllers. So we have stopped the last time at the test of intersite, KCC, nose of role holders, and the last one was the machine account. Today we will continue working with the various DCDIAG tests. We will today talk about NCS, or this test, which is called, let me get it from the official Microsoft website, something called NCSEC DESC. I think this is called NCSEC disk. Okay, we will today talk about this test, which is in simple, as you can see here, it's called check permissions on the naming context. Okay, here he's referring to the database partitions of the Active Directory. So he's saying he will check the database partitions for what? It will check for the security groups assigned to these partitions. Why is that? Why we need to assign security groups to these partitions? Because they are responsible for replicating the database. So for example, here if we go there, we have two groups: enterprise domain controllers and administrators groups. This is the local administrator groups on the domain controller have the correct minimum permissions to replicate. So here the test will check for these two groups if they have the minimum permissions to replicate these four Active Directory database. So what this is the test. It will check permissions on all naming contexts. He is referring to the database partitions like schema, configuration. Here we see schema, configuration, and domain and application. All of these we need to see the groups assigned to them, because they will be responsible, not only the groups assigned to the partitions, but the permissions. So for example, one thing also here not stated, they need to have these two groups need to have something called replicate change or replicate permissions, so they will be able to replicate these databases or partitions to other Active Directory databases or other domain controllers. Not domain controllers, the Active Directory databases on other domain controllers. So this is the description of the test. Okay, it is basically checking security permissions for these two groups on the different Active Directory databases. Why we need to do that? To check if they have the minimum permissions to replicate these Active Directory partitions, which is the same test performed within the check security error. This test used LDAP, so it will communicate, or it will check the permissions on the Active Directory databases on different domain controllers. This will be done using the LDAP protocol. So it will communicate with, for example, the primary domain controller and check the Active Directory databases partitions on the primary domain controller and see if the correct security groups have the correct permissions to replicate these databases on the primary domain controller, and the same will be done on the secondary domain controller. So it will check the different security permissions on the different Active Directory databases on the different domain controllers. So this is one thing, or very simple. We will do a couple of things here. We will take this description and the one provided by Mr. Lobandelpoor. This is another description for the test. Mr. Lobandelpoor has provided us in his PDF. He's saying that this test will check if the security descriptors, here he is referring to the security groups on the naming context had this referred, or naming context, when I'm using the term naming context, I am referring to partitions or database partitions of the Active Directory. Have appropriate permissions for replication. As we can see here, it's clearly stated that these permissions are related to the replication process. But here he didn't include the groups that have these permissions on the Active Directory database. It was stated in the DCDIAG official documentation provided by Microsoft. The naming context is essentially a partition in the Active Directory database. These partitions, if are not correctly set, the replication between domain controllers might fail. A replication could lead to inconsistency in the Active Directory database across domain controllers, which could cause various types if the replication is not done between the Active Directory databases. This will lead to signs like including login failures, inconsistent implementation of Active Directory group policies. Okay, some group policies will not be applied to certain machines, and unpredictable behavior. So let's see, I will take this answer, combine it with the other answer of or the other description provided by Microsoft, and we will see how ChatGPT 4 will give us an answer describing both uh, descriptions, or I will take this description added to the other description and try to take a unified answer or combine the two answers in one answer. So let's wait for a moment and see how we can do that. So let's go and tell him, please explain these two descriptions for the DCDIAG tool, DCDIAG test named NCSSEC, DCSEC, I think this is the correct name, NCSEC disk, in layman terms. Okay, layman's, yes, layman's terms, combine both descriptions in one. Okay, let's see if we first add the first one, and then we can add like shift enter to take a little space. Then we will add the second description, which is this one. So we can take copy and then go there and put it to ChatGPT. Now we have the two answers. Now he can combine them both to give us one simple answer, explaining in layman terms, which means explain it to a non-technical person using non-technical terms. Let's see the answer. Okay, let's go and see the answer here. So let's see what was the answer here. Okay, saying, okay, permissions. Okay, that's perfect, but he didn't give us okay, let's read the answer, because Mr. Lobandalpour has stated that there is some event errors ID that will be recorded in the event viewer if this test fails. So let's see first the answer, read it loudly, and then we can answer it, or we can query the ChatGPT 4o to give us the errors or event IDs if this test fail. Just wait for a moment and let's read it.
The NCSec desk test in the DCDIAG tool checks permissions on key parts of Active Directory, AD, to ensure everything is set correctly for replication and connectivity between domain controllers, DCs. Here's a simplified explanation combining the two descriptions. The NCSec desk test in DCDIAG verifies that the permissions on important sections of the Active Directory, like the schema and configuration, are correct on a source domain controller. This is to make sure that replication, the process where changes are copied across domain controllers, works properly. The test ensures that groups like enterprise domain controllers and administrators have the necessary permissions. If these permissions are incorrect, replication might fail, leading to various issues like login problems or inconsistent application of group policies. Common issues the NC SecDesk test might find include 1. Incorrect permissions. 2. Network problems like firewalls blocking traffic or DNS issues. 3. Schema mismatches between domain controllers. 4. Delays in replication. 5. Corruption in the AD database. The test uses LDAP, a protocol for accessing and maintaining distributed directory information services, and helps administrators identify and resolve these issues to maintain a healthy AD environment. If problems are detected, it might log specific error events like issues with the Knowledge Consistency Checker, KCC, or replication failures.
So you can see here he is saying that, or he have described the test, which is good. Okay, and he's saying that common issues that this test might found. Let's see if it is stated in the PDF. He's saying here that common reasons for failure. Here is saying in the answer, common issues that my test might find or find include. Uh, Here is saying not fail, incorrect permissions. He can find if the test failed, that means that this test find incorrect permissions, network problems like firewalls blocking traffic or DNS issues. If it failed, this means that it will find, or this is the finding, if the test failed, the test will state that maybe the test failed because of incorrect permissions, network problems, schema mismatch between domain controllers, delays in replication, corruption in Active Directory database. The test uses LDAP. Okay, so I think the answer is a little bit not clear. Here is saying that common reasons for failure could include the most cause of error with the NT test is incorrect permission. Test will fail if the enterprise domain controller does not have the replicating directory change permission. This is what I was talking about. Okay, it is if the prime or if the enterprise domain controller doesn't have the replicating directory change permission, then the test will fail. Okay, it will say that this group doesn't have the necessary permissions. Network issues, if there is a problem with the firewall or the DNS, it will not be able to reach the domain controllers and check for the permissions. This is one thing. Schema mismatch. This might occur if there is schema mismatch between domain controllers. This could happen after unsuccessful or partially successful schema update. Okay, so this needs to be clarified a little bit. Why this test will fail if there is a schema mismatch? This is one thing. Replication latency. This okay if the replication or is not done instantly, this could lead to problems that this test because changes on one domain controller take too long to replicate to other domain controllers in the network. Okay, I think uh, maybe this is okay. This is logic because this is related to the permissions, and this is the test primarily focus on the incorrect permissions. For the network issues, this is also obvious because to check for the permissions, it need to reach the domain controllers. So this is done using the DNS. If it's misconfigured, it will not reach the domain controllers to check for the permissions, or there is blocking of the firewall. Okay, so these two are obvious. Okay, but as for the other three, I don't think the NC would fail because of the other three. I don't know actually how this, for example, schema mismatch, how this will affect the NC test. replication latency, how this will affect the NC test Active Directory database corruption. This is obvious because if it's corrupted, you'll not be able to check for the permissions on the Active Directory database. So we need to ask it a little bit of these two issues. Okay, let me ask it again. How the schema mismatches between the domain controllers and the delays in replication will make the NCSSEC DCDIAG test fail. Explain the relationship. The relationship, let's see if he will give us an answer. Okay, let's see the answer here. First of all, he is describing what is the schema. The schema defines the structure of the directory or the Active Directory, including what type of objects can be stored and what attributes or those objects can have, or what properties for these objects. For example, the user, what data should be included with the user in the Active Directory. For example, the email section, the mobile section. Okay, this is the schema. Okay, what will happen if we have a mismatch? A mismatch occurs when there are differences in the schema definitions between domain controllers. So a domain controller have a schema different than the other one. It should be unified across all of the forest. They should have only one schema, and it should be all, or it should be the same on all of the domain controllers in the forest. Okay, this can happen after a schema update that wasn't successfully applied to all domain controllers, correct? Okay, or the replication of the schema update, okay, is not it didn't reach all of the domain controllers. Let's see impact on this test, what it will do. The NT tests check permissions on various AD sections, including schema. Yes, schema partition. If there is a schema mismatch, the permissions that the test is checking might not be consistent across domain control. For example, an attributor object that the test expects to find all domain controls might be missing or different on some of them. This inconsistent can cause the NC-sec test to fail, as it cannot verify the necessary permissions are set correctly when the underlying schema is not uniform. So, just a moment. So here is saying that it will check the schema database partition or the permissions on the schema database partition. If the schema partition is not the same on all of the domain controllers, this will lead to this test to fail, even though it checks for the permissions on this database partition or the schema database partition. It will not it will fail because they are not the same. All of the objects in the schema partition in all of the Active Directory databases in the forest are not the same, so this will make it fail. The inconsistent can cause NC-sec test to fail, as it cannot verify the necessary permissions are set correctly when the underlying schema is not uniform. So this is a little bit of an answer, but even though I am not convinced, let's see for the replication. Delays. Replication is the process by changes made to one domain controller are copied to the other domain controllers to ensure to have the same data. Replication delays. Replication delays occur when changes are not propagated quickly enough between domain controllers. This is due to network issues, high load, or configuration problems. Okay, how this will impact these tests? These tests require all domain controllers have the same permission setting for critical parts of the AD. Okay. If there are delays in the replication, some domain controllers might not have the latest permissions update when the test is run. Okay, one good answer. But I think the permissions are not updated frequently. Maybe for the two groups, enterprise domain controllers and local administrators. Anyway, this is how he explained his explain the question I have provided him with. This means the insect could detect the permissions are not correctly set on all domain controllers, leading to a test failure. So relationship, both schema mismatch and replication delays can cause inconsistency between domain controllers. The NCSec expects uniformity in permissions across all domain controllers to ensure reliable replication and connectivity. Inconsistency due to schema mismatch or delayed replication prevent the test from confirming that the correct permissions are universally applied, resulting in a test failure. Okay, so this is the relationship between these two things and uh, the uh, the NC sec disk test. Let's get the same answer, or let's get the same question and ask different AI tools to explain it. Just wait for a moment. So we'll copy that and then go to Rika and ask it the same question. So let's see if you have combined the two answers together here. Okay, very simple and straightforward answer. Uh, okay, some reasons of failure. Very, very good. This answer is very, very good. I need to read it loudly. So you have successfully combined the two answers, which was not done in this is not done properly by ChatGPT. But let's read the answer.
The NCSEC desk test in DIAG checks the permissions on all naming contexts, like schema, configuration, etc., on a source domain controller, DC, to make sure replication and connectivity between DCs are working properly. It ensures that the enterprise domain controllers and administrators groups have the right permissions, which is the same test as check security error. This test uses a protocol called LDAP, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, to check if the permissions are set correctly. If they're not, replication between DCs might fail, leading to issues like logon failures and inconsistencies in group policy application. Some common reasons for failure include incorrect permissions. The enterprise domain controllers group might not have the right replicating directory changes, permission. Network issues. Problems with the network, like firewalls or DNS misconfigurations, could cause replication to fail. Schema mismatch. A difference in the schema between domain controllers could cause issues. Replication latency. Changes taking too long to replicate between DCs. Active Directory database corruption. Physical corruption of the AD database could lead to a failure of this test. To fix these issues, an administrator should review the error message, identify the cause, and take appropriate action, like fixing permissions, checking network settings, or repairing the AD database. Some related events that might be logged include Event ID 1311, NTDS KCC issues with partitions in Active Directory. Event ID 1084, NTDS replication update failure. Event ID 1694, NTDS replication of a large security descriptor. Event ID 1925, NTDS KCC failure to establish a replication link. Event ID 4013, DNS Server Service DNS Server, waiting for ADDS synchronization to complete.
Yeah, good answer, but even though not that uh, summarized, he is combining the two in a very straightforward way, but let's ask it the same question here. So let's add the relationship between the mismatch and the replication delay, how this will affect the tests. So I think the answer here is good. He is giving us one good answer here. Let me say, first of all, I need to do something. Uh, I need to do something here. I need to take this answer first and confirm it is correct by asking Microsoft Copilot about this answer. Just wait for a moment. Yeah, I think he's still generating the answer. What he is doing, I think he is generating a script, maybe. I don't know what he's doing actually. Anyway, so let's read the answer after he finished. He's saying that schema mismatch between domain controllers and delays in... Okay, he finished. Just wait, let's read, or let's first, before reading it, let's verify it is correct. This to give up the sources, verify if this answer is correct. So I have got the answer is saying it is correct. Uh, okay, this is good. Let's read the answer again. Let's go there and read it loudly.
Schema mismatches between domain controllers and delays in replication can both cause the NCSEC DCDIAG test to fail because they impact the ability of DCs to properly replicate security descriptors and permissions between each other. Here's the relationship. Schema mismatches. The Active Directory schema defines the structure and attributes for objects in the directory. If there's a schema mismatch between DCs, e.g. one DC has an updated schema that another DC doesn't have, it can cause replication errors. When the NCSEC desk test tries to replicate security descriptors between the DCs, it will fail because the schema mismatches prevent the security descriptors from being properly replicated. Replication delays. Active Directory uses multi-master replication, meaning changes made on one DC should be replicated to all other DCs in a timely manner. If there are delays in replication, e.g. due to network issues or high replication traffic, it can cause inconsistencies in the security descriptors and permissions between DCs. When the NCSEC desk test tries to validate permissions on naming contexts, it will fail because the permissions haven't been properly replicated to all DCs due to the replication delays. So in summary, Both schema mismatches and replication delays can cause the NCSEC desk test to fail because they disrupt the normal replication process between DCs, leading to inconsistencies in security descriptors and permissions. The test relies on proper replication to validate that permissions are correctly set on all naming contexts across all DCs.
So a very, very good answer. Here is relating the, the replication, because if the replication is not done correctly, the schema will not be the same on all domain controllers, and the security groups will not be the same on all of the domain controllers. So the replication is a very, very vital process for this test to succeed. Okay, so anyway, you can see here the answer, or why they are related to each other. A very good answer, by the way, but let's see also if we can ask Gemini the same question, if we can tell him to explain this answer. Just wait for a moment. Let's see if he can get us an answer, even though I am not optimistic. Okay, simple answer, but anyway, not that good. So we will bypass it. Let's go and ask a perplexity, but I don't think it will give us. Anyway, let's see the answer. It's a search tool using AI, but let's see if he can give us also one answer here. So, specific aspect of the scriptor would you like to have information on? NC test purpose, NC test command failure. Okay, we need all. Skip question and proceed. So here is giving us a description. Ensuring the integrity of your Active Directory, checks permissions on naming context, okay, to validate replication and so on. So, okay, he didn't add much. The same answer, and he didn't even explain it in simple terms. So, we will not go further. So, as you can see here, this is the explanation of the test. Let's ask it to give us an example. Okay, so explain this test using real world examples in the context of Active Directory, domain, let's say a domain named matrix.internal with a PDC named DCSM 01225 and ADC named DCSM0225. Okay, so we are giving him an example to explain this test, and let's see what will be the answer. But here's something here. Let's see what was the answer here. Okay, he's saying we run the test to check okay, are correctly set. Real world example, if there is a mismatch, okay, fails, okay, okay, let's see the answer, even though I think it's not that good, but let's read it loudly.
Sure, let's use a real-world example to explain the NC-SecDesc test in the context of an Active Directory AD domain named matrix.internal with a primary domain controller, PDC, named DCSM0125, and an additional domain controller, ADC, named DCSM0225. Scenario 1. Domain setup. Your organization, Matrix Corp, has an internal AD domain named matrix.internal. DCSM0125 is the primary domain controller, PDC. DCSM225 is an additional domain controller, ADC. 2. Running the NC-SecDesc test. An administrator runs the command DCDIAG/test NC-SecDesc on DCSM01225 to check the permissions on various naming contexts, like schema configuration, to ensure they are set correctly for replication and connectivity. Real-world examples of issues. 1. Schema mismatch. Example. Update scenario. Suppose you recently updated the AD schema to include new attributes for user objects, which was successfully applied on DCSM01225, but failed to replicate to DCS0225. Effect on NC-SecDesc test. The NC-SecDesc test on DCSM01225 will check if the necessary permissions are correctly set on the new schema objects. Since DCSM225 doesn't have the updated schema, the test will find a mismatch and report that the permissions are not consistent across both domain controllers. This inconsistency can lead to the test failing, as it cannot verify the expected permissions on both controllers. Now to replication delay. Example. Network issue scenario. There is a network issue causing delays in replication between DCSM205 and DCSM0225. As a result, recent changes to permissions on the configuration naming context have not yet propagated from DCSM01225 to DCSM225. Effect on NC-SecDesc test. When the NC-SecDesc test is run on DCSM01225, it checks the permissions on the configuration naming context. Due to the replication delay, DCS0225 still has the old permissions, while DCSM01225 has the updated ones. The test will detect this discrepancy and fail because it requires consistent permissions across all domain controllers to ensure reliable replication and connectivity. How these issues cause NC-SecDesc to fail. Consistency check. The NC-SecDesc test is designed to ensure that the enterprise domain controllers and administrators groups have the correct permissions on critical parts of AD. If any domain controller in the domain, such as DCSM0225, has incorrect or outdated permissions due to schema mismatches or replication delays, the test will fail. Impact on domain health. These failures can indicate potential issues that might lead to larger problems, such as replication failures, login issues, or inconsistencies in policy application. Addressing the root causes, like fixing the schema mismatch or resolving network issues causing replication delays, is crucial to maintaining the health of the domain. Summary. The NC-SecDesc test in the matrix.internal domain with DCSM01225 and DCSM0225 ensures that permissions are consistent across domain controllers to support proper replication and connectivity. Real-world issues like schema mismatches and replication delays disrupt this consistency, causing the test to fail and signaling administrators to address these critical issues to maintain a healthy AD environment.
Okay, I needed to can you elaborate more on the two real world examples stated? They are perfect, but give more details, like which schema or what. Let's see if he will, if tell him to give more details, if he will give us more details to elaborate more on that one. Okay, now he's elaborating more. Okay, this is good one. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Very, very good. Now it seems the example is now more clarified. For example, you will see here that saying, for example, you have added to the schema something called employee ID, okay, and it is not replicated. So it's not replicated, then it will not appear in other Active Directory databases, and the permissions will not be set on this new attribute which is newly created. Okay, so let's see the answer here because I think it's very, very good. Let's read it loudly.
Real-world examples in detail. 1. Schema mismatch example. Update scenario. Background. Matrix Corp decided to extend the Active Directory AD schema to include new attributes for user objects. For example, a new attribute called Employee ID is added to store a unique identifier for each employee. The schema update was initiated on the primary domain controller, DCSM01225, using tools like LDFD or AidPrep. Process. The schema update on DCSM01225 involves modifying the AD database to include the new Employee ID attribute. Once the update is applied, it is supposed to replicate to all other domain controllers including DCSM0225. Issue. Due to a replication issue, the new schema changes, including the Employee ID attribute, did not replicate to DCM0225. This could be due to a temporary network failure, a replication schedule misconfiguration, or an error during the schema update process. Effect on NCSec desk test. The NCSec desk test is run on DCSM01225 to check the permissions on various naming contexts, including the schema. Since DCSM01225 has the updated schema with the Employee ID attribute and DCSM0225 does not, there is a mismatch. The test detects that the Employee ID attribute permissions on DCSM01225 do not have a corresponding match on DCSM0225 because the attribute itself is missing there. This inconsistency causes the test to fail, as it cannot verify that the permissions are correctly set across all domain controllers. Example log message. NCSec desk test failed. Schema mismatch detected between DCSM01225 and DCSM0225. Attribute Employee ID is missing on DCSM0225. Step 2. Replication delay example. Network issue scenario. Matrix Corp's network team performed maintenance, which temporarily affected network connectivity between DCSM01225 and DCS00225. During this time, changes were made to permissions on the configuration naming context on DCSM01225. Process. The permissions were updated to grant additional rights to the Enterprise Admins group. These changes are supposed to replicate to DCSM0225 to ensure consistent permissions across the domain. Issue. Due to the network maintenance, replication of these changes was delayed. DCSM01225 has the updated permissions, but DCS0225 still has the old permissions because it has not received the latest updates. Effect on NCSec desk test. When the NCSec desk test is run on DCSM01225, it checks the permissions on the configuration naming context. The test compares the permissions on DCS01225 with those on DCSM0225. Because of the replication delay, DCSM0225 still has the outdated permissions, creating a discrepancy. The test fails because it identifies that the permissions are not consistent across all domain controllers, indicating potential issues in replication or network connectivity. Example log message. NCSec desk test failed. Replication delay detected. Configuration naming context permissions differ between DCSM 01225 and DCSM 0225. Detailed impact and resolution, schema mismatch impact, user impact. Applications or scripts relying on the employee ID attribute might fail on DCSM 0225. Users managed by DCSM 25 might experience issues if operations depend on the updated schema. Resolution. Identify and resolve the cause of the schema replication failure. Manually force replication using the repadmin tool. Repadmin syncall DCSM 025 ED/A. Ensure that the schema update is correctly applied to all domain controllers. Replication delay impact. User impact. Group policies or administrative tasks requiring the updated permissions might fail on DCSM 0225. Potential security vulnerabilities if permissions intended to restrict access are not applied uniformly. Resolution. Diagnose and resolve network issues affecting replication. Force immediate replication using repadmin. Repadmin/syncall DCSM 0225 E/D/A. Verify that permissions are correctly updated and consistent across all domain controllers. By understanding these detailed real-world examples, administrators can better diagnose and resolve issues detected by the NCSec desk test, ensuring a healthy and consistent Active Directory environment.
Very, very good answer. He have already clarified the example that he has given before, but in more details, and now I have a clear vision about this test. So let's see the other answer of the other AI tools. For example, if I go and ask the same question for Rika, let's see if how we will explain it. Not a good answer. I can see here that there is some schema mismatch. Okay, have said the same answer as ChatGPT for O, but here is saying that the test, when test runs, it will try to replicate the updated schema. The test will not replicate. Okay, so this is not correct. Replication delays. Okay, this is a user account that is replicated, but this is not also the issue here. We are trying to replicate permissions, okay, on the Active Directory database. Okay, so this answer was correct. Okay, I think this answer is not correct at all. Okay, so this is not correct at all. Here the only good one is the permission inconsistency. Let's say enterprise domain controllers have granted additional permissions. If does not have the updated permissions, the permission will be inconsistent. Okay, so this is good. The test will run on, so it will check enterprise domain controllers have the same permissions on DC 0225. If their permission inconsistent, test will fail. This is correct. Okay, as for the replication delays, this is not the same. We have seen here in the replication delays, the one provided by ChatGPT for O is correct because it is related to the database. Okay, the Active Directory database. Okay, not to users. Here is say not to users or to user accounts. This is not the issue here, okay? And the same for the schema. The schema here is saying that the test will replicate. It will not replicate. Okay, so this is not correct at all. Let me try to see if I give this to Gemini, but I don't think it will give me any good answer. Okay, okay, not that good. Okay, even though he have three variants of this answer, but still the least one of them. Okay, I don't think it. No, the same. So the least one of them. Okay, I don't like the answer at all. Okay, so now we have the answer. We have a real world example on it. So I think now we have clarified this test and what does it do. Let's continue and see the other tests. So I just uh, going with the PDF. So you will try to run the test. Even though I have the primary domain controller suspended, but the test will succeed. So this is not an indicator that your Active Directory health or the database health is correct or you have the correct thing. Okay, let's see when we try to run it, but first we need to not double S, it's only one. And it will run only because this is suspended, so it will run only on this additional domain controller. So let's see if we run it. Yes, say it is passed. Okay, and it is done on this one. Okay, it doesn't run on the other one. It say it is succeed on this one, but the other one it failed, or it not failed, it didn't run it at all. Okay, so and it is succeeded, so we can see this test is not that good unless unless it is just a moment, unless the two are running. Just wait for a moment. Essentially partition. Okay, this is correct. And you can see here, this is another thing. This is checks for security descriptors on the naming context head that have appropriate permissions for replication. Okay, this is the naming context is essentially a partition in the Active Directory, so just checks the user SID, the group SID, list of privileges and other access information. It will check it with the security descriptor on the Active Directory database. So this is the user permissions. It will match it or it will compare it with the permissions on the Active Directory database. Okay, so for example, uh, 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 the domain controller or the primary domain controller is a member of the group of the enterprise domain controllers. This is the group SID. It will see if it will match with the group SID on the Active Directory database. It will check both to see if they are the same or not. And if this for the user SID, it will check. And then it will see the list of privileges and it will check with it. So anyway, this is a very, very simple way to verify. It will verify the domain controller information with the information set or the permission set on the Active Directory database. So I can do something here. I can go like this and ask ChatGPT to explain it. Just we can do like this and take a screenshot. Fill file and save as, and then make it a capture 1000 and ask ChatGPT to explain it, even though it's very, very simple, but let's see if we can get an answer from here. Explain this screenshot using layman terms. Okay, let's see. Uh, let's see here the answer. In the security descriptor, he is saying an AD object, not a file or directory. This is on the database. Okay, the owner SID who owns the primary group list used for auditing access to the object contains access control entries that define the permissions for users. Okay, and then the check process. Relax token and security descriptor to see. Okay, very, very good example. Let me read it loudly.
This screenshot shows a diagram explaining how the NC-SEC desk test in Active Directory AD works in terms of checking permissions. Here's a simplified explanation. Diagram components. 1. User access token. This represents the user trying to access a part of Active Directory. It contains user's ID, security identifier, a unique ID for the user. Groups IDs, IDs for the groups the user belongs to. List of privileges and other access information. Information about the user's access rights. 2. Object security descriptor. This represents the security settings for an AD object, like a file or a directory. It contains owner's SID, the ID of the user who owns the object. Primary group SID, the ID of the primary group associated with the object. SACL, System Access Control List, used for auditing access to the object. DACL, Discretionary Access Control List, contains access control entries, ACEs, that define the permissions for users and groups. Access check process. When a user tries to access an AD object, the system performs an access check. It compares the user access token with the object security descriptor to see if the user has the necessary permissions. NC-SEC desk test. The NC-SEC desk test specifically checks the security descriptors, the settings that control who can access what on the naming context heads, key parts of the AD database. It ensures these descriptors have the correct permissions for replication, meaning that the necessary groups and users can read and write changes to AD. Real-world example. Imagine you have a file cabinet, the AD object, with a lock, the security descriptor. Each employee, user, has a key ring, user access token, with keys, SysDs, and privileges. The access check is like trying to use the keys to open the lock. If the keys match the lock settings, the employee can open the cabinet. The NSEEK desk test ensures that the locks on all important file cabinets, naming contexts, are set up correctly so that authorized employees can open them when needed, ensuring smooth operation and data consistency across the organization. This process helps maintain a secure and well-functioning Active Directory environment.
Very, very good answer. Let's see if Rika can do the same or explain it in a more simple way. If we go to this one and then go to matrix final and then go to the same uh, screenshot, explain this screenshot using layman's terms. Okay, it will take a little bit of time. Let's go and continue working with the video until it finishes. So we can see this common reasons for failure of the test, and we have gone through it. Okay, inconsistency between domain controller databases. With this test, if it failed, it will lead to inconsistent Active Directory databases between all domain controller login failures. Some group policies will not be applied, and other unpredictable behavior. Okay, so say for example, this is for yes, the replication failed because mismatch. So this is the one provided by ChatGPT for all the schema mismatch. Okay, so this will lead to the failure of the NC sec disk test. Okay, and these are the errors that will be logged if this test failed. You can ask you can ask the AI tools to explain each one of these events if you need to have more info about the event itself. So we can continue. I think we will go to the next test. Okay. So this is the next text, which is Netlogons. Let's wait for a moment and then continue with the test. But first, let's see the answer of uh, Rika. I can hide it. Okay. Object descriptor. Okay. Okay. User token. So he's explaining all of these. I think the answer could be a little bit simple. Let's see the answer.
This image is a diagram explaining a part of the security system in a computer directory database, like the one used in Windows. Let's break down the components. User Access Token. This is like an ID card for a user that contains their User Security Identifier, SID, and a list of permissions, privileges they have. Object Security Descriptor. This is like a security sign on a door that contains information about who can access the object, like a file or folder, and what they can do. Owner's SID and primary group SID. These are like the owner and group owner of the door. The owner can give permissions to others, and the group owner might have specific permissions too. SACL, System Access Control List. This is like a special permission list that logs who tries to access the door and what they try to do. DACL, Discretionary Access Control List. This is the main permission list that contains access control entries, ACEs. Each ACE is like a rule that says who a user or group SID is allowed or denied access and what level of access they have, like read, write, or execute. Access check. This is like the action of checking the ID against the door's permission list to decide if the user can enter. So, when a user, or a program acting on behalf of a user, tries to access an object, the system checks the user's access token against the object's security descriptor to see if they're allowed to do what they're trying to do. Attach a file.
Okay, so here he has succeeded in explaining the the screenshot, but he didn't recognize that this to be done by the test or NC disk test. He didn't recognize that, okay, but he has successfully explained it in a simple way, but he didn't recognize that will be done using the NCSec disk test. Okay, so anyway, not a complete answer, but we can give it a thumb down. You didn't see in the screenshot that this is done using DCDIAG and CSSEC disk test. Anyway, so we can go and see the other test of Netlogons. What is the Netlogons? Validates that the user running DCDIAG, so we are running the test on the domain controller. He need to verify that the user running the DCDIAG can connect to read the sysvol and Netlogin shares without any security errors. It also verifies that the administrators, authenticated users, and everyone group had the access this computer from network privilege. Very, very good. So this is very, very important. Why? Because the sysvol folder and the netlogin folder contains the group policies and the scripts that will be applied to all of the computers and users in the domain. So the authenticated users should have access to this folder, so the group policies can be applied to them. The same for if you need to apply, for example, this is a folder containing group policies. The authenticated users should have read to this folder so they can read and apply the group policies. As for the netlogin, it will contain the scripts. Also, they need to have read permissions on it so they can apply the scripts. So very, very good. He's saying that access this computer from network privilege. This is one of the most important uh, permissions. So the authenticated user should have access to the domain controller. Okay, should have access to the domain controller, especially these folders, and have read permissions on them so they can apply the different group policies and the scripts. So very, very good one. We will need to take this and give it to the ChatGPT, and let's go further with the description in this PDF. He's saying that the netlogin service on the domain controller is up and running. So this is another part of the answer. If we go there, he's saying that the netlogins, okay, it verified the security permissions on these two folders, which is very, very important. So the group policies can be applied, okay, and the Active Directory login script also will be applied. And one important thing also, we need to make sure that the netlogin service is running on the domain controllers, because this is very, very important for authenticating the users and the computers to the domain controller. Okay, the Netlogon service plays a crucial role in the authentication process for computer and user accounts in the Active Directory. It's also responsible for operations like updating and apply group policies. So if this service is not running, okay, the group policies will not be applied and the user will not be able to log in. Okay, and this is one of the things the test will check this service is running, and it will check again, it will check if the authenticated users and administrators have the necessary permissions on this critical two shared folders that contains the group policies to be applied and the uh, scripts that will be applied to the users. So for example, if the Netlogin service is not running, users will not be able to log in to the domain. They will not be able to access the sysvol folder and the Netlogin share. So the group policies will not be applied and the scripts will not be applied. So, for example, if the Netlogin service is running, but the permissions on the folders are not correct, then also this will lead to problems with applying the group policies or applying the scripts. So very, very important test to make sure that the permissions on these two critical folders is there. And we will see, let's ask the ChatGPT to combine this answer with the other answer and see how it will give us uh, a vision about what the net login test will do. Just wait for a moment. So let's go there and explain this text, these two texts, explain and combine. These two texts to that describes the DCDIAG Netlogons test. Explain using layman's terms. Okay, let's put the answer here. This is the first one, and then shift enter and get the other one. Right click and copy, and let's see here how it will if there is any other answer here. Okay, anyway, okay, so we can put all of them in one. Okay, that's correct. Then let's see the answer. So as we can see here, this is, I think, a very, very good answer. Let's see or read it loudly and see what does it say.
Sure, let's combine and simplify these descriptions of the DCDIAG Netlogons test. Hashar. Netlogons test in layman's terms. The Netlogons test in the DCDIAG tool checks that certain key services and shares on a domain controller, DC, are working correctly and can be accessed without any issues. This test is part of Microsoft's Directory Service Diagnostics tool, DCDIAG.exe, which helps ensure that the Active Directory AD system is healthy. What the Netlogons test does. 1. Sysvol and Netlogon shares. It verifies that the user running the test can connect to and read the sysvol and Netlogon shares. These are important shared folders on a DC used for things like storing group policies and login scripts. It checks that these shares are accessible and there are no security errors. 2. Permissions check. It ensures that the administrators, authenticated users, and everyone groups have the necessary permissions to access the DC from the network. 3. Netlogon service. It confirms that the Netlogon service is running properly on the DC. This service is essential for the authentication process of users and computers in the AD domain and helps with applying group policies. Common issues and causes of test failures. 1. Service interruption. If the Netlogon service is stopped or not functioning correctly, the test will fail. 2. Network issues. Problems with network settings, such as incorrect DNS configurations, can cause the Netlogon service to fail. 3. Replication errors. If AD data is not replicating correctly between DCs, the Netlogon service might lack the information it needs, leading to test failures. 4. Share issues. If the sysvol or Netlogon shares are missing or not shared properly, the test will fail. 5. File system permissions. Incorrect permissions on the sysvol folder can prevent the Netlogon service from working correctly, causing the test to fail. Example event IDs for troubleshooting. Event ID Telsan53 indicates Windows can't determine the user or computer name. Event ID 158 indicates Windows can't access the file for group policy. Event ID 5706 indicates the Netlogon service couldn't create the shared file. Event ID F719 indicates no domain controllers are available due to network issues or DCs being down. Event ID 522 indicates a failed secure session with a DC due to an account name collision. Event ID 5805 indicates an attempt to log on with an unknown account from a specific workstation. Resolving issues. Restart Netlogon service if it's stopped or malfunctioning. Check network settings. Ensure DNS settings and other network configurations are correct. Verify replication health. Make sure AD data is replicating correctly between DCs. Correct permissions. Ensure correct permissions are set on the sysvol folder. Summary. The DCDIAG test Netlogon command ensures that crucial AD services and shares on a DC are functioning correctly and can be accessed without security issues. It checks the Netlogon service, sysvol, and Netlogon shares, and verifies necessary permissions. Common issues like service interruptions, network problems, replication errors, share issues, and incorrect permissions can cause the test to fail. Understanding these helps maintain a healthy and secure AD environment.
So this is a very, very good answer, and I will ask it. So for example, we can see here that if the service is interrupted, so if the Netlogons service is not working properly, this will make the Netlogons test fail. But what about if there is a problem with DNS? How this will affect the Netlogin service? We need to know, or to give an example to know that replication, if the replication is not done, how this will affect the Netlogin service. Okay, if there is a problem with the sysvol or netlogin permissions, we have seen this. We all know that the users should have access to these two folders to apply the group policies and the script. But how this also will affect the netlogin service? We need to know this because this is not clear from here. We all know this is the first one is very, very straightforward. But what if there is a problem with DNS? How this will affect the netlogin service? If there is a problem with the replication, how this will affect the Netlogin service. If there is a problem with the share or the sysvol and Netlogin share, if they are not shared, if these two folders are not shared, how this will affect the Netlogin. Okay, if the permissions on the sysvol folder is not correct, how this will affect the Netlogin service. We all know that these two folders, the users or authenticated users should have access to these two folders to apply the group policies and scripts, but also what is the relation of these permissions to the Netlogin service. We need to have a clear vision, and I will ask it now this question. So let me ask it one question. First of all, let's go and ask, please explain the relationship between the Netlogin service failure, and each one of the common issues and causes of test failure. Let's see here how it will clarify. Let's see. For example, what? For example, why, if there is a problem in DNS, how this will affect Netlogon service. Okay, so let's see one of the answers here. He's saying, let me go further and ask it. For example, if we go to the DNS, the one that I was talking about, where is the DNS? Okay, for example, DNS is crucial for the AD because it translates domain names to IP addresses, allowing computers to locate and communicate with each other. Okay, if the DNS is not correct, domain controllers may not be able to find each other or other network resources. For example, if a DC cannot resolve the name of another DC, it will not be able to replicate. Correct. Okay, how this will affect the Netlogin service? Netlogin service rely on DNS to locate other DCs and register its own. Okay, register its own records. Without DNS correct, the login service might fail to operate properly because it cannot resolve necessary network names or advertise its presence. Okay, for example, if a user is trying to authenticate itself to a certain domain controller, okay, so the Netlogin service should search for this domain controller through the DNS. So he's saying without correct DNS functionality, the Netlogin service might fail to operate properly because it cannot resolve necessary network names or advertise its presence. Okay, so a Netlogin service depend upon the DNS to locate the domain controllers and then authenticate the users to the domain controller. Okay, so this is the Netlogin service. Okay, so correct. Maybe this is one. So let me read it loudly. Let's see the answer of ChatGPT. I think it's correct or it's perfect. Let's read it.
Certainly. Let's explore how each common issue can cause the Netlogon service to fail and subsequently lead to a failure in the Netlogons test. Now 1. Service interruption. Description. The Netlogon service needs to be running on the domain controller, DC, for proper authentication and other AD operations. Relationship. If the Netlogon service is stopped or not running correctly, the DC cannot handle authentication requests or perform its role in updating and applying group policies. This directly causes the Netlogons test to fail because the service is essential for the operations being checked. 2. Network issues, e.g. DNS problems. Description. DNS, domain name system, is crucial for AD because it translates domain names into IP addresses, allowing computers to locate and communicate with each other. Relationship, DNS misconfigurations. If DNS settings are incorrect, domain controllers may not be able to find each other or other network resources. For example, if a DC cannot resolve the name of another DC, it won't be able to replicate AD data or verify authentication requests properly. Impact on Netlogons service. The Netlogons service relies on DNS to locate other DCs and register its own records. Without correct DNS functionality, the Netlogons service might fail to operate properly because it cannot resolve necessary network names or advertise its presence. Netlogons test failure. When the test checks the sysvol and netlogon shares and the overall health of the Netlogons service, DNS issues can prevent proper access and communication, leading to test failure. Have 3. Replication errors. Description. AD replication ensures that changes made on one DC are copied to other DCs. Replication delays or failures. If there are errors in replication, one DC might have outdated or incomplete information. This can lead to inconsistencies in user authentication data or group policy information. Impact on Netlogons service. The Netlogons service might not have the latest information needed to authenticate users or apply policies. For example, a user might be unable to log in if their credentials haven't replicated to the DC they are trying to authenticate against. Netlogons test failure. The test will fail if the Netlogons service cannot verify current and accurate information due to replication errors. However, 4. Sysvol Netlogons share issues. Description. Sysvol and Netlogon are critical shared folders on a DC. Sysvol stores group policy and logon scripts, while Netlogon is used for logon services. Relationship. Missing or unshared folders. If the sysvol or Netlogon shares are not available, users might be unable to log in, and group policies might not apply correctly. Impact on Netlogons service. The Netlogons service relies on these shares to distribute logon scripts and other necessary files during the authentication process. If these shares are missing or not shared properly, the service cannot perform its required functions. Netlogons test failure. The test checks access to these shares, and any issues will cause it to fail, indicating a problem with the Netlogons service. 5. File system permissions. Description. Proper permissions are needed on the sysvol folder to ensure that necessary groups can access and modify files as needed. Relationship. Incorrect permissions. If permissions on the sysvol folder are set incorrectly, it can prevent users and services from accessing necessary files. For instance, if the authenticated users group does not have read access, users might not receive logon scripts or group policies. Impact on Netlogons service. The Netlogons service might fail to deliver logon scripts or apply policies if it cannot access the sysvol folder. This can hinder the authentication process and overall network login functionality. Netlogons test failure. The test checks for correct permissions and access. If permissions are incorrect, the test will fail, indicating a potential problem with the Netlogons service's ability to function correctly. Summary. Each of these issues affects the Netlogons service in a specific way. Service interruption. Directly stops the service from running. DNS problems. Prevents the service from locating other DCs or advertising its presence. Replication errors. Leads to outdated or incomplete data, affecting authentication and policy application. Share issues. Blocks access to essential files needed for login processes. File system permissions. Restricts access to critical files, hindering the service's operations. By understanding these relationships, administrators can diagnose and resolve issues more effectively, ensuring a healthy AD environment.
Very, very good answer. Now we can know each one of these reasons how it will affect the Netlogons service in very, very simple terms. Let me ask the same question. So we will ask Rika the same question to explain these. Just wait for a moment. So we'll copy this one and ask Rika to do the same. But first we need to go further and tell him explain. Let's see the answer. think there is a problem with the... Okay. And let's ask Gemini, but still I am not that optimistic, because the answer is not correct, or he didn't give us a good answer. But let's wait and see the answer here. So okay. Mhm. Okay. Okay, bonus. So I don't think it's that good. Still, the answers are not that good. Gemini is failing in every test. Okay, that we are trying to ask it. Okay, so you can see here, this is the health check. Okay, check the network. Working like the internet or wires. Check information. Okay, the net test will fail if node 7 is not running. DNS, but he's saying that check if the information is shared properly. He's talking about replication. This refers to replication, and this refers to DNS. This refers to sysvol, and check for permissions. Okay, seems to be uh, good. Okay, okay, let's read the answer. Okay, let's go and read it loudly.
The DIAG/test. Netlogons test is like a health check for a part of a computer system called the Active Directory, which helps organize and manage users and computers in a network, like a big office or school. The Netlogon service is like a helper that makes sure users and computers can log in and get the permissions they need. The test checks if this helper is working properly. Here's what the test does and why it might fail. Checks if the helper, Netlogon service, is running. If the helper isn't working, the test will fail. It's like if the person in charge of giving out lunch tickets wasn't at their post. Checks the network. The test makes sure the network is working well, like the internet or the wires that connect computers. If there's a problem with the network, the test might fail. Checks if information is shared properly. The test makes sure that important information about users and computers is shared between different computers in the network. If there's a problem with sharing, the test might fail. Checks the shared folders. Sysvol and Netlogon the test make sure that special folders with important files are shared correctly. If these folders are missing or not shared properly, the test might fail. Checks the permissions. The test makes sure that the right people can access the special folders. If the permissions are wrong, the test might fail. If the test fails, an IT person should look at the error message, find out why it failed, and fix the problem. This could involve restarting the Netlogon service, checking the network, making sure information is shared properly, or fixing the permissions on the special folders. The text also mentions some event IDs, which are like codes that help IT people understand what went wrong. For example, if there's an issue with logging in or with the network, these codes can help pinpoint the problem.
Anyway, the answer is not that good, but okay. Let's ask it to provide all the relationship, but he didn't. Okay, let's see if I give him the same question. Copy, and then let's see the answer. Until it finishes, let's go and ask ChatGPT to provide a real-world example, just to clarify it more. Okay, let's go there. Hmm? And let's see Rika first. Okay, let's see if you can explain this. Let's let's wait and see. Okay, that's a good one. Okay, correct. They will try and do not try to reach the domain controller that contains the Netlogin service. So this is one of the things. But the test is uh, testing in the Netlogin service. So, for example, maybe a Netlogin service is trying to communicate with another network, a Netlogin service on another domain controller. So every domain controller has a Netlogin service. Maybe they are trying to communicate with each other. So this will be a problem. Okay. Uh, no, not that good. I think this example is not correct at all. Anyway, so let's see the answer of ChatGPT concerning this test. So let's see the answer. Here you go. So I think the answer will be good. Let's read it.
Sure, let's use a real-world example to explain the Netlogons test in the context of an Active Directory AD domain matrix.internal with a primary domain controller, PDC, named DCSM01225, and an additional domain controller, ADC, named DCSM025. Real-world examples of issues. Scenario overview. Matrix Corp has an internal AD domain named matrix.internal. The primary domain controller is DCSM01225, and there is an additional domain controller, DCSM0225. The IT team at Matrix Corp runs the Netlogons test to ensure the domain controllers are functioning correctly. Example 1. Service interruption scenario. The Netlogon service on DCSM0225 has stopped due to an unexpected crash. Effect. When the Netlogons test is run, it fails because it cannot verify that the Netlogon service is running on DCSM0225. Users trying to authenticate against DCSM0225 might experience login issues because the service that handles authentication is not available. Example log message. Netlogons test failed. The Netlogon service on DCSM0225 is not running. Resolution. The administrator checks the status of the Netlogon service on DCSM0225 and restarts it. They then rerun the Netlogons test to confirm that the service is now running correctly. Example 2. DNS problems. Scenario. There is a DNS misconfiguration and DCSM025 cannot resolve the name of DCSM01225. Effect. The Netlogon service on DCSM0225 fails to register its records in DNS and cannot locate DCS01225 for replication and other AD operations. The Netlogons test fails because it cannot verify proper communication and operation between the domain controllers. Example log message. Netlogons test failed. DCSM0225 cannot resolve the DNS name of DCSM0125. Resolution. The administrator corrects the DNS settings on DCSM0225 and ensures that the domain controllers can resolve each other's names. They then rerun the Netlogons test to confirm proper DNS resolution and communication. Example 3. Replication errors. Scenario. AD replication between DCSM01225 and DCSM0225 is failing due to a network issue. Effect: DCSM0225 does not have the latest user account information and group policies. The Netlogons test fails because the Netlogons service on DCSM0225 cannot authenticate users with the most up-to-date information. Example log message: Netlogons test failed. Replication errors detected between DCSM01225 and DCSM025. Resolution: the administrator identifies and fixes the network issue causing replication failures. They force a replication using repadmin/syncall DCSM0225/ed/a. They rerun the Netlogons tests to ensure replication is functioning correctly. Example 4. Sysvol Netlogon share issues. The Sysvol share on DCSM0225 is not accessible due to a misconfiguration. Effect: group policies and logon scripts stored in Sysvol cannot be accessed by users logging in via DCSM0225. The Netlogons test fails because it cannot connect to the Sysvol share on DCSM0225. Example log message: Netlogons test failed. Sysvol share on DCSM0225 is not accessible as a solution. The administrator reconfigures the Sysvol share settings on DCSM0225 to ensure it is properly shared and accessible. They rerun the Netlogons test to confirm access to the Sysvol share. Hard example 5. File system permissions. The permissions on the Sysvol folder on DCSM0225 are incorrectly set, preventing access by the authenticated users group. Effect: users cannot receive logon scripts or group policies, leading to login and policy application issues. The Netlogons test fails because it detects incorrect permissions on the Sysvol folder. Example log message: Netlogons test failed. Incorrect permissions on Sysvol folder on DCSM0225. Resolution: the administrator corrects the permissions on the Sysvol folder, ensuring that necessary groups, e.g. authenticated users, have the required access. They rerun the Netlogons test to ensure permissions are correctly set. Summary: by running the Netlogons test, administrators can detect and resolve issues related to the Netlogon service, DNS configuration, AD replication, Sysvol Netlogon shares, and file system permissions. These steps ensure that the domain controllers in the matrix.internal domain, such as DCSM01225 and DCSM0225, are functioning correctly, allowing users to authenticate and receive necessary policies and scripts without issues.
Here's one thing I need to verify. He's saying here in the DNS, okay, that the Netlogin service fails to register its records in DNS. That means that the Netlogin service is registered in the DNS. So like registering the LDAP service and the Kerberos service. Let's see if this answer is correct. I need to ask Copilot, verify if this answer is correct. Okay, is the answer correct? Does the Netlogin service register itself in DNS like LDAP and Kerberos services do? Give references. برضه معليش. Sorry guys, I'm talking in Arabic. Let's see. It attempts to register this record when it fail in first stars and periodically about 1 hour the default configuration. So let's see here. Uh, is responsible for registering AD related DNS records. It attempts to register these records when it first starts and periodically after 1 hour. Force a DC to register ADNS records with no login start. You didn't answer my question. Answer my question. Okay, so this is one error related to ChatGPT 4.0. The Netlogons service does not register itself in DNS in the same way the LDAP and Kerberos did. Instead, it relies on DNS server to handle DNS registration. Here are the details. Okay, anyway, so focuses on authentication and secure channel establishment. It does not directly handle DNS registration, instead it relies on the DNS. So in summary, Netlog doesn't register DNS records itself. It plays a crucial, so this one thing here. So if you go there and see ChatGPT concerning this one. Okay, maybe he's talking about the DCs. Okay, it relies on DNS to locate other DCs and register its own records. Okay, he's talking about DCs, not Netlogin service. Might fail to properly cannot resolve necessary names advertise its presence. No, I think this is not correct. No, he's talking about there is a record for the Netlogin service. Okay, so this is not correct. Here, the DNS, the more reasonable reason that the Netlogin service will not able to locate domain controllers to authenticate the users to, because the DNS records are not correct. So I think this is one thing or one correct thing. Let's see if maybe if we ask uh, once the relationship ship between Netlogon service and DNS. Let's see the answer. We cannot authenticate user and domain controller cannot register DNS records. If user passes user credentials through the encrypted channel to the domain controller and returns the domain security identifiers and user rights. If the Netlogin service stops, the computer cannot authenticate users and services, therefore cannot register DNS. So if a computer is trying to authenticate itself to the domain controller, it should ask the Netlogin service to do so. If it's not working, it will not register the computer to the domain controller in the DNS records. But this is not a straightforward answer. Okay. So I think let me go to Rika. Also go to uh, Perplexity. Let's ask it what is the relationship between net login service fails if the DNS, if there is misconfiguration of DNS on DC. Let's see the answer. So let's see the answer of perplexity, which will give us a good one. The relationship between Netlogin service failing a domain controller and the misconfiguration is closely linked. The Netlogin service is responsible for registering DNS records for the DC. Okay, so it's responsible for registering the computers in the DNS records on the domain controller. Okay, the DNS misconfiguration can prevent the Netlogin service from running for functionally correcting. How DNS configuration affects login. Incorrect DNS settings. DNS settings on the DC are incorrect, such as using DC owns IP address as the primary DNS. The Netlogin service may fail to register DNS records. This can cause the DC to be unable to locate other DCs. Oh, good one. The domain leading to replication failures and issues. So, if there is a misconfiguration in the DNS, the Netlogin service will not register computers in the DNS server. So this is correct, on not even register other domain controllers in DNS, which will lead to replication failures and issues. So correct one, or this is a very, very good one. Okay. DNS not running. DNS service not running or not configured correctly. Netlogin service will fail to register DNS records. This can cause the DC to be unable to locate other DCs in the domain, leading to replication and other issues. So the Netlogin service is responsible for registering computers in the DNS server, okay, by creating records for this. For example, if I'm a computer joining the domain, so the Netlogin service will authenticate the computer and register it in the DNS. Okay, so I think this is one thing. So here is saying if the Netlogin service or there is a problem with the configuration of the DNS, the Netlogin may fail to register DNS record. They can cause DC to be unable to locate other DCs. Okay, in indirect way, it's saying that the Netlogin service will not be able to register other domain controllers. Okay, I think this is related to Netlogin service finding the other domain controllers. Let's see DNS cache, DNS configuration. Example is not configured to allow dynamic update logins will not be able to register. Uh, he's saying that the event when the netlog itself fails to register the network is due to misconfiguration, unable to resolve IP address due to other DNS failure. So the netlogin is responsible for registering or registering computers in the DNS. So one very important thing, the Netlogin is registering computers in the DNS. Okay, so very, very important. So if this service is not running, it will not register computers in the DNS. So very, very good one. Or there is a misconfiguration. It will not register the computers in the correct DNS server. Correct? So for example, if he needs to register a computer to a certain domain controller, if this domain controller is not recorded in the DNS correctly, it will not be able to register the computer to this the domain controller DNS records. I think this is maybe this is a correct answer. Let me ask it to give an example. Give an example. So let's see this one. You have a DC name DC1 with IP address. DC is configured to use the DNS. Okay, even though you can use the domain controller as a DNS server, okay, at its primary DNS. However, the DNS server is not configured to allow dynamic updates, which is required for Netlogin service to register DNS records. The Netlogin service C1 fails to start and you see so and so unable to resist the cause. The problem is not configured to allow dynamic updates, which is required for Netlogin service to register DNS records. To resolve this issue, okay, okay, make the example for a workstation. Just joining the domain. Okay, this is not the correct answer. Anyway, so the Netlogin service depend on the DNS to locate the domain controllers, to authenticate the users to, or to register the computers to the DNS on the domain controller. I think this is one of the things, or that one that I have already uh, detected, okay, or the one that I have already uh, uh, known. Okay, so now I think we will stop at this moment. Okay, we'll stop at this minute. Here we are at minute 53:24, so we'll continue in the upcoming video with the other tests. Hope this video is informative for you all, and thank you all for viewing. Thank you so much.